So I have this presentation that I've given now at a few startup conferences called The 5 Steps to Product Market Fit. And it really puts together everything I've learned over the last 2 years and 60 plus episodes and puts it all in one place. And I thought, you know what? It's the end of the year. We're now in December. It's probably a good time to effectively do a bit of a recap and put all of the lessons in one place. Welcome to the Product Market Fit Show, brought to you by Mistral, a seed stage firm based in Canada. I'm Pablo. I'm a founder turned VC. My goal is to help early stage founders like you find product market fit. You know, back in my gym track days, I remember this one story. I'll never forget it. I was in a boardroom with my co-founder, Lee Silverstone, who you heard about in last episode, and a few other people, plus our CFO, Ken McCaskill. And Ken was a very experienced person. He, in his 50s, had been in and around startups effectively for his whole life as CFO, had seen many exits. We were young, right at that time. We were like 20-year-olds, kind of gung-ho, move fast and break things. Like, this is just how we thought about things. And we really couldn't care less about all the details. And for us, details included HR, included finance, included anything that wasn't hype, that wasn't, selling to customers, creating $1 billion company. And in this one meeting, Ken was trying desperately to get us to implement like basic financial controls, like really basic stuff. And we were pushing back. And we're like, Ken, we don't want to do any of these things. This is like, all this is going to do is just going to slow us down. This is just big company stuff. It really doesn't matter. We're kind of going back and forth with Ken. And at one point, Ken turns to me and he's like, Pablo, why do cars have brakes? I'm like, Ken, what are you talking about? Like, we're in the middle of discussion and we're getting heated. I'm like, Ken, what are you talking about? And he's like, why do cars have brakes? I don't know. So they can slow down? And he's like, no, it's so they can go faster. I was like, all right, that he just won. He 100% won that discussion. But I bring that up and I start there because what I realize now looking back is that Ken understood something that neither Lee nor I understood back then, which is that in startup land, what I like to say is mistakes are unavoidable, but avoidable mistakes are unaffordable. And Ken, having been through it so many times, what he noticed is that by pushing back against pretty basic things, we were just bound to make avoidable mistakes. And he was trying desperately to get us to not do that. And in fact, if you actually look at the research, what you'll find is that super founders, these are multi-time founders who've had material success in the past. Super founders are 6 times more likely than first-time founders to create a unicorn. And this is in spite of anecdotal evidence. You think about Mark Zuckerberg, you think about Steve Jobs, a lot of these big successes who are super young, who are first-time founders when they started their respective companies. They're the exception. They're not the rule. The rule is super founders are more likely to create unicorns. And one of the big reasons for this, there's a bunch of reasons, but one of them is that having been through it before, super founders are not making avoidable mistakes. And by avoiding those, they radically dial up their odds of success. And so that's really kind of the goal, I think, of this presentation is by putting together, and frankly, this whole show, right, is by giving you anecdotes, and myself too, because I've been learning so much by doing this and seeing what other founders have done, the mistakes they've made, the right decisions they've made. We can all avoid the mistakes that we don't have to make. So the only mistakes left over are those that are inescapable, right? Because this is obviously hard. This is startup land. No one does it perfect. But if you can cut out all the mistakes you didn't have to make, you are increasing your odds of success. Here's the 5 steps to product market fit. The first one, maybe just as context, everybody that's listening to this, 100% of you have heard of and have probably read the book, The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, right? Because Lean Startup has become the defining movement for the whole startup world. And it's made things like the MVP, the minimum viable product, popular beyond belief. I mean, I don't think there's any founder that doesn't know what MVP means. It is great. It's helped founders iterate on solutions faster. But it does effectively jump a step. And I think it's led to almost some confusion because what often happens is that founders, as soon as they have an idea, jump to the MVP. They want to build something, put something out there and start testing and iterating. What I found talking to all of these founders is that before startup mode, there's research mode. And this is really kind of step number one. So here, let's dive in through a story because that's really how we'll add color to all this. One of the episodes I did a while back was with Mike, the CEO of Ada. Ada is now a unicorn out of Toronto doing over 50 million in ARR. And here's Mike's story. When Mike started, his first product was actually his company that then became Ada was called Volley. And the product was like a social search engine. And it had some traction. Like it was doing okay. It was gaining users, but not much revenue. And then what Mike started to notice is that as his user base grew, his quality of customer support, of customer success started to decrease. And he started to dig into this. And the point that I find is really interesting is that at this point, to be clear, like Mike was a venture-backed founder. So he had already raised from institutional VCs. And yet he sees this other problem and he decides, you know what, let's dig into this. And the way that he digs into this is the level of research that I'm talking about. He and his co-founder end up spending a full year as customer support agents for third-party companies. They are co-founders, CEO and CTO of this other company. And instead of doing like CEO things, what they do is they spend a full year as customer support agents. And the reason they do that is to learn every single thing that you can learn and truly breathe and live customer success for over a year. And so over time, as they learn the role of a customer service agent, they start automating themselves out of a job. And what comes out of that is Ada, which is a customer service chatbot. The thing that stands out to me there is that when Mike started this company, Ada, chatbots were like all the rage. There were so many chatbots out there. But there is a huge difference between a founder saying, oh, it wouldn't be cool to have a chatbot for customer support, and another founder who does the work and spends months and months doing on-the-ground research as close to the customer as humanly possible, because they will understand subtleties and get unique insights that nobody else will. So it's no surprise that he was able to build that out to the success that it's become. And so that's really step one. Before startup mode, there's research mode. Before I jump to step two, another book that's really popular amongst founders is called Only the Paranoid Survive by Andy Grove, who was the CEO of Intel at one point. And without kind of getting into that whole book, there's really one quote out of that book that I think is particularly important, because what it says is success breeds complacency. Complacency breeds failure. Only the paranoid survive. And so the idea there is that, and this is the point that Andy was making in his book, as companies get big and they get successful, they tend to get complacent. But as you get complacent, you're inevitably going to fail. And so the key quality for the CEO of a successful company is paranoia. That doesn't really translate into early stage startups, because in early stage startups, they're not successful. And so there's kind of nothing to really be paranoid about. But I have found what I believe is the most important trait when it comes to early stage startups, and that is that only the insanely focused survive. And so the key trait amongst the best founders that I've met, that I've spoken with, is insane focus. And I use that word on purpose, like insane, because truly the stuff that this level of focus makes them do from an outside perspective, an objective perspective, is truly insane. So here's an example. One of the episodes we did was with Wealthsimple. And so I spoke with Mike, the founder of Wealthsimple. Wealthsimple is a super popular finance app in Canada, worth over $5 billion. They have like 10% of Canadians have this app. Here's what Mike did when he started. And this is a direct quote. He said, I used to call every single user within 30 seconds of signing up. And he would call them and he would say, hi, I'm Mike, co-founder of Wealthsimple. I just wanted to say thank you so much for signing up. Here's my number. If you ever need anything, you can call me directly. I'd love to hear how you heard about us. Thank you and be in touch. Here's why this is insane for a few reasons. Number one, he called every customer within 30 seconds of sign up. Just think about how attentive you need to be to when customers are signing up to deliver on that. The second thing is, you have to understand, these are not like B2B customers paying Mike $10,000 a year. It's not like he has 5 or 10 of these customers. These are free consumers. Like, these are users that may never spend an actual dollar on Wealthsimple. All they've done is really just downloaded and started to use an app. And he's calling them and giving them his personal phone number. So you can only imagine the sort of calls and texts he would get at any time of the day, Saturday, Sunday, didn't matter. It was insane, but it worked. It was insanely focused because all he cared about was customer satisfaction. Another one that's worth mentioning is Mark, the founder of GoBold. He was just named Forbes 30 under 30, and he's got a company called GoBold that's in logistics, doing over $100 million in revenue today. What he told me is that in the early days, he had a 1-800 line, and it was available 24/7, as many of those lines are, except that he was the one that was answering the calls. He says, I remember taking a call at 2 a.m. If my phone rang, I would pick it up whenever because it could have been a sale. Again, think about that. It's like, man, it's 2 a.m. Can you just like go to sleep? You know what I mean? But the guy would pick it up whenever it rang because he was obsessed with customer service. And you can obviously imagine what that does in terms of word of mouth. If you're calling a company at ridiculous times and you always get an answer. And by the way, of course, he wouldn't tell you it's the CEO, but it was the CEO, which means the level of customer support you were probably getting was a 12 out of 10 sort of experience. And that's one of the key reasons why Mark was able to understand his customers so well, but also deliver the sort of support that truly set him apart and helped him become what he has become today. And so that's step 2 of product market fit. Only the insanely focused survive. The third step, and something that I've actually mentioned many times on the show, is you have to be in the market to win the market. I say that not just because it sounds kind of cool, but because there's actually some deep truth behind it. You know, at first blush, if you think that you have to be in the market to win the market, it's kind of like true by definition. I mean, you could assume it kind of lacks meaning. But if you really think about it, there's 2 things that you have to be in the market to win the market means. The first one is that the best founders, from what I've found, almost always start with niche markets. And it's niche markets that help those founders discover the unique insights that help them become what they later become. The second thing is you can't strategize yourself to success. Markets expand as a result of delivering value. You have to be in the market to win the market. Only by being in the market can you discover unique insights. And only by reacting to what happens over time can you get pulled and pulled and pulled until you realize, wow, you have a massive opportunity. But that massive opportunity is unlikely to be found in a Gartner report. It's unlikely to be thought through by reasoning through a PowerPoint deck. It's going to come as a result of being in the market. The best example I could think of is the story of Alan, the CEO of Wattpad. Wattpad is a massive marketplace today with 100 million users. It's a global community of readers and writers where anybody can create a story and anybody can read those stories. Today, it's got mass appeal. But when Alan started, before the iPhone, what he did, and this is the era of mobile phones, flip phones, no app store, the things people needed to do to get apps on their phone was kind of ludicrous if you think about it. And so what he started with was classic books on the go, because his problem was nobody's going to write for Wattpad since there's no audience. And so what he figured out was, we could take classic books, like classic fiction stories that everybody's heard of, and just make them mobile friendly. And he did that. And that was like such a niche audience. I mean, who specifically, just think about the world of people who, have a mobile phone, who like to read on their mobile phone, who like to specifically read fiction books on their mobile phone. I mean, it's a pretty small market, but he delivered on it and he did it really well. And that drove word of mouth. It drove blog posts. It drove SEO, and it led to insights. And after a while of doing this, he finally had his first upload. Somebody actually uploaded. He created an audience. It was a small audience of thousands of people, just thousands. And then he finally had somebody create a book, and that kind of started and got the flywheel going. And then what he did over time is he kind of lubricated and facilitated that flywheel. And he benefited from things that he could not have foreseen, like the iPhone in 2007, the App Store in 2008, and the mobile wave that kind of drove him and pushed him forward, so that 15 years later, he exited for over $500 million. You have to be in the market to win the market. Did Alan know the App Store was going to come out? No. Did Alan know how many smartphones, that even there would be smartphones and how many there would be in the future? No, he didn't. He didn't know how things were going to play out. He didn't strategize his way to success. He got into the market. He delivered real value. He got unique insights, and he let the market pull him to success. The final book that I'll mention has absolutely nothing to do with startups. It's Man's Search for Meaning. It's my favorite book. I've read it over 3 times. I highly recommend it because it's a life philosophy book that has actually changed my perspective on life. I mention it here, though, because of one quote. So Viktor Frankl, who's a psychologist, he lived through the Holocaust, and he was a Holocaust survivor, one of the few survivors out of his camp. And coming out of that, he wrote what is effectively like a new philosophy on life, Man's Search for Meaning. In here, he says this quote: "Happiness is and must remain a side effect or byproduct, and is destroyed and spoiled to the degree to which it is made a goal in itself. Happiness is and must remain a side effect or byproduct. and is destroyed and spoiled to the degree to which it has made a goal in itself. It's like sleeping. The harder you try to sleep, the less you're going to sleep. The harder you try to just be happy, the harder it's going to be. You can't just be happy. You've got to do other things. You've got to work on meaningful work. You've got to have a job you love. You've got to work on meaningful relationships, and you've got to work on health. And if you do those things as a byproduct, you'll be happy. Why do I mention that here? Because if you change just one word, you get what I believe is a deep truth about product market fit. You see, when it comes to product market fit, growth is and must remain a side effect or byproduct. It is destroyed and spoiled to the degree to which it has made a goal in itself. You cannot, in the early days, focus obsessively on growth. Growth is a phenomenon that happens post product market fit. Before product market fit, you need to forget growth and find value. The only thing that matters is delivering value. You can't think about forecasts. You can't think about 10, 20% month over month growth. They're fictitious items. They don't even make any sense, and they will lead you astray. Here's an example of what this looks like. So Jack, he's the CEO and co-founder of Clio, which is a legal tech startup worth over $1.5 billion, almost 1,000 employees today. When he started, he decided he wanted to do a beta program, which many, many founders do. But here's what Jack did differently. Jack decided to add friction to the funnel. And so in order to become part of his beta program, you needed to jump through hoops. Specifically, I remember like a 30-minute webinar and I think a few other things. And what Jack said to me was that the question we asked ourselves is, how can we really create a hurdle to get into the beta? We approached the beta as something that we would rather have a small handful of very highly engaged customers. Now think about it. When you're trying to grow, what is the number one thing you get told? Lower friction. Make it frictionless. You should make your onboarding frictionless. You should make your sales process frictionless. You should make everything, reduce the friction in your entire funnel so that people can get through the funnel faster and you can grow more. If Jack was focused on growth, he wouldn't have done any of this. But Jack was not focused on growth. He was focused on delivering value. And so he did the exact opposite. He added friction to the funnel. So the people that got through are only the customers that really mattered. And then he worked with those customers for 6 months to figure out what the right feature set and product set and problem solution set were to deliver real value. Once he delivered real value, and he knew that he did because of these beta customers and the way they were engaging with his product, he launched the full version and later on focused on growth. And I guarantee you today, Clio is focused on growth. I'm sure they have quarterly targets, annual targets. I'm sure they think about how they can add more sales and marketing, more product features to improve growth. But that is something you focus on after product market fit, because before product market fit, you don't have a formula. You don't know what's going to lead to more growth. So you need to forget growth and find value. So step 5, the final and the most important step by far, is you must solve a number one problem. And the rule is you need to pivot harder, faster. Here's a little secret. I have spoken with hundreds of early stage startups, hundreds. Many of them have pivoted. Now, I have yet, and I don't know what you have, but I have yet to meet a single founder who's ever said to me, you know what, Pablo, I really regret making that pivot. Not a single one. I have met many who've said to me, oh, I wish I pivoted sooner, but none that said, I wish I hadn't made that pivot. So that tells you something. It tells you that if anything, what you're not doing enough is you're not pivoting fast enough. You're not pivoting hard enough. You're thinking about everything you've built and your sunk costs, and you're saying, how can I optimize these a little bit better? How can I do these micro changes? But the way you really need to look at things is, this is day 0. Every single day is day 0. And imagine, here's the kind of thought experiment. Imagine you were dropped today into your startup as is, and you had done none of the work, and you had made none of the effort, and you had what you had, the money you had, the employees and the product, everything that you had. What would you do, right? Clean slate. Every day is a clean slate before product market fit, because you have way more to lose by not changing deep enough, by not changing hard enough, than you have by changing too much. So here's an example that'll really kind of make this come to life, right? And this is actually one of the first episodes ever. I did this episode because I knew this story and how powerful it was. So I spoke with Rob, who's the CEO of Unavoidable. Unavoidable is now doing over $10 million in ARR and growing exceptionally fast, solving the e-commerce checkout errors problem, which I'll get into in a second. But I knew Rob from the very early days. Rob is a young first-time founder in his 20s. And I recall that his first kind of product was 3D stores. And so it starts like many of these first-time founder stories start. And now I've realized that this is a sign that, good things are not on the horizon, which is that when somebody, especially first-time founder, starts a company, an industry they know nothing about, with the words, wouldn't it be cool if? And so Rob is, Rob and Kaylin is his co-founder, they're going around and they, just living their lives. And one day, after going through some retail stores, retailers that are selling, clothing, hoodies, jeans, whatever, he kind of realizes, man, these stores, they put a lot of time and thought into the design, the layout of the stores. But then when I go online to buy something, they all look the same. They're these 2D catalogs. Wouldn't it be cool if we took a 3D kind of imaging of the store and brought that online so people could click through the store online and shop? Now, Rob and Kaylin, they're hustlers. And so they battled for a couple of years, and they actually got somewhere. They had 15 customers. They had 3,000 in MRR, but just that, right? 3,000 in MRR after 2 years of hard work. And this is when things were really about to change, because I remember Rob coming to me and telling me, look, I know it's been a struggle, it's been a battle, but man, we are there because we have this large enterprise customer who is going to totally change the revenue dynamics of this company. They're going to be such a massive customer. And then Rob gets a call. And here's his quote. He says, the retailer came back to us a couple of weeks after. I remember the day. This was February 27th, 2019. They said, hey, we were reviewing our budget for the year and we had to make some adjustments. We'll reconsider you next year. But you know what? Rob had heard this way too many times. Next quarter, next year. And he was done with it. And so what he decided to do was shut down his entire product and go all the way back to step one. And he called all 15 customers. He said, look, we're discontinuing our current product, but we'd love to interview you and really understand your day-to-day, really understand your problems. And so he did true ground level research. And after talking to many of them, he identified some problem sets. One of them seemed to really resonate, because what one customer told him was, listen, I've got this problem. It affects maybe 5 to 10% of my revenue, which is that sometimes people, they'll go to the website, they'll pick out some clothing, they'll add it to cart, they'll get to the checkout page, they try to check out, and they face some sort of bug, some sort of error that prevents them from actually paying, and they abandon cart. And Rob was like, wow, that's that's a powerful problem. And that's really painful, because you've done so much work getting that customer all the way to the funnel, and because of a bug, they can't close. And so after looking into it, and then he went back and talked to all the other customers, he realized this was not a problem just for that one customer. It was a problem for almost all of them. And he realized that they actually could solve this problem, identify bugs. And specifically, this is like, you use this device with this browser set. There's combinations. There's a lot of things going on. I won't get too much into it. But the point is, he realized that this was a pervasive problem that he actually could address. And he started addressing it. He pivoted hard, right? He abandoned everything else that he was going to do. He solved a top of mind pain point. And he is now the second fastest growing company in the entire country of Canada. So it took him 2 years on product one to get to 3,000 MRR. 2 years after pivoting, he was at 300,000 in MRR, and he's kept growing since. Like I said, now they're doing about $1 million a month. So this is the power of solving top of mind problems. I think one of the things I like to think back is, the movie with Will Ferrell, Talladega Nights, right? And Ricky Bobby's a race car driver, and one of his quotes in the early days of the movie is like, "If you ain't first, you're last." And then he goes on to realize that when it comes to racing, actually, you could be second, you could be third, all these other things, but actually, if you think about startups, if you think about product market fit, if you ain't first, you're last. You have to pivot harder, faster until you solve a number one pain point. And so those are the 5 steps, right? Going through them again. Before startup mode, there's research mode. That's how you become an expert and you find problems worth solving. Number 2, only the insanely focused survive. It's only through insane focus that you can focus all your resources so you can do more with less. Number 3, you have to be in the market to win the market. That's how you use niche markets to discover unique insights. Number 4, forget growth, find value. You optimize everything for value delivery. Growth will come as a result. Number 5, pivot harder, faster. As soon as you realize you've gone through step 1 and 4 and you realize you're still not solving a number 1 problem, pivot. I wish that this was all there was to it. I wish that this was truly a recipe. Like if I were to give you a 5-step recipe to cook a steak, you would end up every single time with the perfect steak. And yet, I'm going to give you, and I have given you, a 5-step roadmap to find product market fit. And I can't even guarantee that you're going to find product market fit, which honestly, for a while, really pissed me off. It really rubbed me the wrong way because I'm like, what's the point of all this? I mean, a recipe that doesn't even get you the final product isn't really a recipe at all. And it's true. It's honestly not a recipe. This is maybe like best practice because this is still startup world. This is more art than science. As much as we all want a formula, there is no formula. But it still bothered me that there was like no guarantee. I couldn't give you something that would actually guarantee that you would find product market fit. Until I was like driving, thinking about this, and I thought back to another story that was on the show with Marty, the founder of Blockthrough. And Marty is, like, to me, the definition of a founder cockroach. This is a founder who cannot be killed. And I thought back to his story, right? Marty starts in 2010 with his first startup, which ends up failing. 3 years later, 2013, this is when I meet him. He's working on a second startup called Micrometrics as I start Gymtrack. And a couple of years in, he actually ends up leaving his own startup because he and his co-founder can't seem to get aligned. So now it's 2013, he's basically failed twice. But Marty has nothing else in his head except for being a founder, except for finding product market fit. In 2015, he meets someone who had started something in the ad tech space. Marty knew nothing about ad tech, but for whatever reason, the problem set really resonated with him, and so he decided to join. And the idea that this person was working on was effectively beating ad blockers. And so if you think about like CNN.com, they make money through ads, and ad blockers were coming in and blocking all of the ads. And so the idea was to try and find a way around the ad blockers so they can still serve ads to customers and help companies like CNN make money. Anyways, this was the idea. From 2015 to 2018, Marty and his team put products out that continue to not deliver on what they promised to deliver on. This is a known problem in ad tech, and many different folks were trying to solve it, and no one had been able to. And yet Marty, for whatever reason, thinks that he and his team can do it. But 2015, 2016, they put out product 1. 2017, they put out product 2, and nothing. None of them work. They fall flat on their face to the point that Marty has to actually lay off his co-founder and CTO, the person who brought him on, because he felt that that person couldn't deliver on the product. Now, in the meantime, by the way, Marty's on for 8 years and he's got zero success, nothing to show for it. When he started in 2010, he was in his 20s. His friends were in his 20s. And so his friends were doing not that much. Like, they were students, they were working kind of low-end jobs. Marty had none to lose. But now, fast forward 8 years later, and Marty's friends are doctors, they're lawyers, they're successful founders. And all of a sudden, it's weighing on him. He's like, man, I've been in this for 8 years and I've got none to show for it. Like, what am I doing? In the meantime, Marty's got bills to pay, not just his own bills, but his startup bills. He's only raised like a couple $100,000 and he's continuously raising. He has to constantly meet investors and pitch them and put on that air of confidence to get like $10,000, $25,000 so that the company can go a few more weeks. But at this point, it's 2018, and unfortunately, Marty's at the end of the road. He's got 4 weeks of runway left. That's what he told me, 4 weeks of runway when he puts out the third version of his product. And I was, because I was a friend, and still am a friend, but at the time I was getting kind of these monthly emails. 5 months after, I wish I could show you the slide, but 5 months after he puts out this product in 2018, he's at $100,000 in revenue. This product explodes. Month 1, 1,000. Month 2, 10,000 in revenue. 3, 20,000, 40,000. By month 5, he has $100,000 in monthly revenue. And he kept growing after that. He went from $1 million ARR to 10 million ARR. And last year, he sold his business for nearly $100 million. And this was effectively a bootstrap business. He raised very little money. So you can imagine Marty did really well. I share this story not just because it's interesting, because it's powerful. I share this story because through this, I learned that there kind of is a guaranteed way of finding product market fit. And it's still a little unsettling, but it's still true. It's not so much that you should never give up, because that can be taken the wrong way. The reality is Marty gave up on many products because there's no guarantee that a given product will find product market fit. Marty gave up on multiple startups, if you recall, because again, there's no guarantee that any given startup will find product market fit. What Marty didn't give up on is finding product market fit itself. You see, 99.99% of founders cannot be the next Steve Jobs, but 100% of founders, I believe, can be the next Marty. But what you have to do is you have to stay in the game. If you listen to this episode and the show and you like it, I have a huge favor to ask for you. Well, it's actually a really small favor, but it has huge impact. But whichever app you're listening to this episode on, take it out, go to Product Market Fit Show and leave a review. Please. It's going to help. It's not just going to help me, to be clear. It's going to help other founders discover this show, because the algorithms, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Apple, whether it's any other podcast player, one of the big things they look at is frequency of reviews. It's quantity of reviews. And the reality is, if all of you listening right now left reviews, we would have thousands of reviews. So please take literally a minute, even if you're just writing like great podcast or I love this podcast, whatever it is, just write a few words. Obviously, the longer the better, the more detailed the better, but write anything, leave 5 stars, and you will be helping me, but most importantly, many other founders just like you discover the show. Thank you.